how do you devalue a currency, and why would something like that take place? And do we see that going on now?
Well, the US dollar is the reserve currency for the world. Everybody's debt is denominated in dollars. So you can go to any country and have your currency converted from dollars to the local currency if you travel, but they would actually prefer that you give them dollars because the dollar is worth more. And so the dollar is the denomination that most world debt is calculated in. And in order for the World Economic Forum, the World Bank, any of the globalists, like you mentioned, in order for them to bring about a world economy, which we know from Revelation is going to happen, you have to get rid of the reserve currency that's owned by one nation, because that doesn't work with a one world government. So in order to do that, you have to get rid of the US dollar. Well, how do you get rid of the reserve currency for the entire world? And it's 3 C's. You cripple it, confiscate it, or crash it. Cripple it would be to take down the U.S. economy, meaning to take down their stock market, to get the run on the banks where all the banks had to close, something like that. But that is a huge scale operation to take down an entire country's financial system. So then you go to number 2. If you can't cripple it, then what do? Well, then you confiscate the wealth. If, I don't know that you have listeners old enough to remember that, but in 1933, FDR confiscated all of the gold. He just made an edict and said, you have to turn it in. Well, some people willingly did. Some people were guilted into it. He called them hoarders because they were hoarding the gold. And when the executive order came out, he actually said to return it to the government as if it belonged to them. It was the people's gold. They owned the coins, but he wanted them to return it to the government. And of course, anybody who resisted was called out and guilted into giving it up. And the ones who wouldn't give it up, it was eventually confiscated. But confiscating it is one way to do it. Now, that's kind of a difficult ask, because if you were to consider just the amount of currency and coin, U.S. actual printed money that's in circulation, if you counted everything from the money in people's safe in their house to the pocket change in your wallet to the bags of money in banks, you're looking at about $7 trillion of fiat currency that's in dollar denominations that's in circulation right now. That would be pretty hard to confiscate all of that, because some people wouldn't give it up. Some of it, they don't even know where it is, so that'd be difficult. Plus, when we use the word cash, we're actually talking about 4 categories. There's, according to the U.S. government and the U.S. Bank and the Fed and all those, they refer to it in the 4 M's. There's M0, M1, 2, and 3. M0 is what I'm describing right now. All of the liquid convertible cash that you could walk into a grocery store and buy a loaf of bread with it. Okay. There's also M1, 2, and 3. Those are other assets that can be converted to cash. In other words, your 401k, for example, can be converted to cash. If you have a mutual fund, at some point, it has to be converted to cash. You can't go into the bank and say, I want to withdraw $100 from my mutual fund. It doesn't work that way. Mutual fund is a completely different financial instrument. But eventually it can be converted to cash, just not easily. But your credit card or your check account or something like that, you can walk into your bank with a debit card, and in 30 seconds with a teller at the counter or in a drive-through, you can convert a plastic debit card into $100 bills. It's easily transactable. There are other kinds of currency, what we call money, that are not easily convertible, things like bearer bonds and debt that is transmitted between financial institutions. So there's all different kinds of things that we call money. You can imagine, just from that description, to confiscate all of that would be almost impossible, because your 401k, my 401k, it's not like you have that sitting in a safe somewhere. You can't go to your bank and they point to your box and there, your 401k is over there. It doesn't work like that. It's all digital. You can get your money from your 401k, but it's not easily converted into cash. So to confiscate all of the money would be, again, almost impossible. So you go to C number 3, which is crash it. You have to completely devalue it to zero by crashing the stock market, runs on all the banks, and convert everything that is in circulation, basically reduce it to zero, make it so that nobody wants cash. Well, how do you do that? That's another question, another conversation. We'll, get into that a little bit later, but there is a bunch of money that is not easily accessible. Money in the stock market, money in derivatives. You brought that up. We'll talk about that as well and what that is and why that's a big problem. But when you're talking about currency, cash, money that we think of when we think of money, talking about $7 trillion. But the big payoff, the money that they have to get in order to crash the entire economy, is all of the derivative money, all of the futures and options contracts and things that support the money behind the money, the vehicles that banks use to transact. And that is a lot more money.